when you first log on to TransactionDesk, you'll see something that looks similar to this. On my particular dashboard or home screen, I've customized it to include the transactions and AuthentiSign widgets. You can customize this to show whatever it is that you would like. You can have as much or as little on the page. In the upper right corner, it looks like a stoplight menu, the 3 dots, and that gives you the Show Widgets option. And anything that's blue or green in this little toolbar, you can just click and hold and drag down and drop onto the dashboard or home page. And so as you use the program, you'll discover more of what these do and how they might help. Primarily, I've got create transactions, start AuthentiSign, meaning send something for electronic signature, emailing documents, faxing documents, transaction I've already got in progress, and things I've already sent out for electronic signature. To me, in my humble personal opinion, those were the things that seemed most pertinent, so those are the widgets and wizards that I dropped. But again, you can drag and drop any that you work with or prefer to work with. You can rearrange them just by clicking and holding on the title there, and you can click the little X to close them out anytime you want. So you may not know initially what you would like or how to configure it, but as you use it more, again, you can choose to change that anytime you want. Moving to the left side of the screen, in the very top, there's something that looks like a little stack of pancakes. Instinet refers to those as their hamburger menus, the 3 little green lines there. Once you click those lines, it's just going to expand the left side of the menu. If you hover on any of these icons, it tells you what they are, but if you click that, then it just expands it so you can see the text label. I'm going to head to Setup first. So if you'll click Setup or the little gears in the lower left, you'll be on the Setup Options page, and it's important to just go into Preferences and double check that your name, your phone number, your email, all of that information that we pulled from the membership database is up to date and accurate. Double check your office info as well, just to be sure, again, we have the correct information there. You won't be able to change your office information. You would just need to contact HAR if there was something incorrect, and they can take care of that for you. You should be able to change most of the parts of your user information yourself. And then your email signature, you would also configure yourself. So whatever you typically have in your signature, your name, your brokerage firm name, contact information, all of that stuff, links to the IABS form if you choose to do that. However, again, you typically configure your signature, you would want to do that here. Anytime you email forms or transactions out to a consumer, it'll include this signature. So having it set up ahead of time, it makes it automatically on those emails instead of having to manually type it each time. And then in the branding section, this is a place for photos and logos. If you want your personal image to be in the system, it would show up next to your signature in those email messages you're sending out. It's not required at all. It's just a nicety to have your little face smiling back at them when your name and phone number appear. And then same thing with your company logo. If you choose to include that, you just simply click and upload it from there. And backing up just a touch, they do have something called the fax back cover sheet and email banner image. This, as you can see on the screen there, is supposed to be 800 by 125. It's just a little graphic that would appear at the top of their email messages. Some of the email messages you would send, it would have that included at the top. And then the fax back cover sheet, that's something that's automatically created within the program. We'll see it later in today's webinar. But if your client wants to fax documents or needs to fax documents instead of using email, if they will use this fax back cover sheet that's created by the system, it will send it by typical paper fax from their end, but it will be a digital copy on your end. It'll automatically come into TransactionDesk and go straight into the transaction that it pertains to. Again, we'll create those together in the webinar today, so you'll see that and learn a little more about what it looks like and how it works. If you want a graphic at the top of it, great. If not, you still have full access to the cover sheet in the email functions. So again, it's just a nicety to have those pictures, but not a requirement. The last section about logging in, if you want to change your password, you can. It will not affect your HAR login. So you would need to log into HAR and then a second time to TransactionDesk if you change your password here. So no need to change that, but if you would like to, you certainly can. And then backing up one step back into setup, you can either use your back arrow in your browser or just click the setup menu one more time. We are going to go straight into those transaction templates. So clicking on the link or the menu item called Transaction Templates in the setup options will take you into where you can build those. And I've got a couple of fake sample ones, as you can see in here. When you log on, you may see nothing, or you may see several that your office has created for you. The intent, sort of the original idea that TransactionDesk had, would be that your brokerage firm, your company, would log in, create your templates or packets of forms, and then they would kind of be guiding you through how to use the right form, which forms go with a listing, which forms to use for a buyer, and that type of thing. So helping you, mentoring you, but also helping you keep in compliance and therefore helping keep them in compliance. So your office may already have several different templates built and created in there for you. On my screen, I've got some that have two heads, meaning they're a multi-user or office level template, and then this top one is just an agent only template. Even if your company has created templates, you can still create any number, an unlimited number of your own templates. If your company hasn't created templates naturally, you can create your own and then be able to utilize both should they add in templates later. All right, so top right corner where it says add is where you're going to go to add a new template. In TransactionDesk, most all of your controllers are in the upper right side of the screen, in the top right corner specifically. So if you're trying to figure out something, just look on the right side of the screen or up in the top right and you'll probably find what you're needing. Once you click the plus or the add, you will not have this choice right here for personal or office unless you're an administrator or a broker. So your first typical choice is going to be to name it something, the first field you come to. And you can call the template whatever you'd like. Consumers don't see the name of your templates. They do see the names of your transactions. So I can call this something super simple like stuff for a listing or things that I need for a buyer or whatever it might be. My personal convention, naming convention, includes the word my. I always put my listing template, my buyer packet, whatever it might be, so that once I am looking at mine versus my office's templates, I can easily tell which one were mine. So maybe put something like your initials in there or just come up with a naming convention that works for you that would help you very quickly notice this was your listing template versus the office listing template. Just a little motherly advice on that one. So I am going to be pretty simple in my example here today and call it listing template for webinar. And then under the type, that has to do with the transaction type. So residential, lease listing or purchase, or commercial, lease listing or purchase. And then if you wanted to describe it further, you could. And again, the name of mine typically is something pretty descriptive, and I don't need to describe it further. Again, consumers don't see that. It's just for your own benefit for later. All right, so then you click Save, and you've basically created a folder that's empty so far called listing template in this case. As you scroll down this page, you'll see the different kinds of things you could add into the template. Most commonly, or the simplest form of a template, is to just add forms. So at the very bottom, that selection that says forms, of course, has its little plus or add in the right corner, and you'll be able to add in forms. Before I do that, just to kind of quickly point it out, the difference in their verbiage versus maybe the way I would refer to something, they have forms and documents, which are technically two different things within TransactionDesk. A form in TransactionDesk is a fillable thing, something I'm filling out, an HAR, TAR, or TREC form. A document would be anything else. So a PDF that I was emailed as an attachment that I want to upload, or pictures of the property, or items that were faxed or scanned to me as PDFs, or those digital faxes. Those are all documents. Again, TransactionDesk is pretty good about helping keep you organized, and it does offer you a couple of different ways to upload documents into the system, which again we'll look at here in a moment. But that's the main fundamental difference between forms and documents. Some companies like to have a PDF copy of the IABS form scanned and uploaded into the transaction as a document, as opposed to the agent filling it out each time. So again, just a couple examples for you. I'm going to go ahead and click the Add icon in that form section, and then you'll get a pop-up with the HAR, TAR, and TREC libraries. If you click on any one of those library names, it'll expand it and show you all the forms within that folder. All the forms are arranged here alphabetically, so just scroll through and find the form name, or you can use the key term search up there at the top. It can be a name or a number that you search for. And you don't have to have clicked on any one of these folders. You can just start typing. If I type 1101, for instance, that's the TAR 1101 residential listing agreement. Clicking the little checkbox to select that form, it's going to put a copy of it up here in the basket for me. And then I can go look for the next form that I might need. And again, you can type either a word, keyword, or key number, and it'll suggest whatever it can find with those numbers or words in it. So looking at seller's disclosure specifically, there are two different versions of the same form. The TAR 1406 seller's disclosure form, you can see there one of them has the title that includes AuthentiSign, and the other one does not. AuthentiSign is just their brand name for their electronic signature piece. So this one that includes the term AuthentiSign one-step process is for the client to fill out electronically. So I can email them the seller's disclosure, and not only will they be able to sign it, but they will be checking their yes, no's, unknowns, completing that entire form digitally, then signing it, and then sending it back to me through that AuthentiSign system. The other one that doesn't include the word AuthentiSign can be sent to them by email. They can print it out, open it up, hand fill it out, and sign it with the traditional wet ink kind of process, and then fax it back or email it back by scanning it and attaching it or something like that. The one that has AuthentiSign in it can be used in all those ways. It can be sent by standard email for them to open and print or filled out online. The one that doesn't include AuthentiSign can't be filled out online. So I'm going to check both just so that we can have them both available in my transaction. And again, you would continue on through the process of finding all the forms that you would need. I'm not allowed to advise you as to which forms to use. Your broker or manager will be able to do that for you. So always double check with your office staff or broker there for guidance. Pretty simply labeled here, the IABS form is a pretty good one to include. The listing agreement's a pretty good one to include. Your seller's disclosure is a good one. So that'll get us started. And again, it's put copies of everything I've checked up here in the basket. When you click the basket, you'll open and see everything in there. You can click the little minus symbol to remove it if you realize you picked up the wrong form or decided you don't want one or whatever it might be. You can easily get rid of them from the basket. And then once you have all of the forms that you want, you'll click Add. So that basically takes copies of those forms and now puts blank copies in my transaction template. If you click on the name of the form or the little stoplight menu to the right of the form, you have the ability to go in and edit that, and you can pre-fill some of the data on that form. Your brokerage firm name, for instance, is always going to be the same. So if you wanted to fill that in on your IABS listing agreement, your broker name, license number, your name, your email address, those types of things, you can pre-fill some of that information through the template. Each transaction will have a different client probably, but pre-filling a handful of things on the template saves you at least that little bit of typing. Also on this screen where you have the white space next to the form, you can click and hold and rearrange the forms. I happen to have checked them in this order. I picked the listing agreement first, so it put it first, but I might want that IABS form to be the first thing I get signed, so I'll just move it up. And again, if you click the name of the form or use the stoplight menu to edit it, you'll be in the form itself. and you just fill in the blanks with what you do know. Again, being a fake listing, I have a fake broker. Bear with me while I take a moment to type this in. TransactionDesk is pretty good about auto-populating from form to form. So I don't really need to have a cover sheet. I know there's another program out there that uses those cover sheets. Anything you fill in on the forms will auto-populate to any other forms that are in TransactionDesk. Meaning if I put my client's email in on this listing agreement, it'll be auto-populating over to the e-signature piece or any of the other forms where they're needing to sign that. All right. And again, the seller, the address, those types of things that are unique to each transaction would not be necessarily something you would fill in at this stage. But again, you could fill in the certain percentage of commission or anything else that you wanted. You can use this little book icon or menu at the top to jump to the last page, to put your broker license number, your contact info, whatever it is, depending on which form you're in. And then again, my name here at the bottom. And the program auto saves for you about every 20 seconds or so, but there is a save button there in this file menu if you choose. Otherwise, you can just click exit and just trust it. And then you don't really need to, as I mentioned, open the other forms and fill anything in by hand because it's probably populated all of that stuff to those other forms. But you certainly could open and check each one. So that's the very simplest form of a template. Just adding the forms. Again, I know there's 62 other forms probably for a listing, but that gives you an idea of how it would work. Again, you just fill in however specific or general you want the template to be, depending on whether you called it listing template for new construction homes or homes in mud districts, homes with lead-based paint. So I could make separate packets for all of those different varying types of listings, or I could just make one big old packet that has every form I might ever need for any kind of listing. When I use it for a transaction, I can take out forms and add additional forms. So if I make kind of a general packet for listings and then I come to a property that does have lead-based paint, I don't have to have the lead-based paint addendums in my template. I can just add it to the one transaction. So again, you get pros and cons. You get full control over how much or how little you want in those templates, and they're completely unique and custom to you and your preferences. Again, always defer to your broker and managers for advice on what to put in there or how it can be used, or if you aren't familiar yet with what forms you might need, then certainly seek their guidance to have them help you do that. I'm going to come back to checklists a little bit later in the webinar and just briefly touch on those and incorporate one of those into my templates as well. But for now, I'm going to go back to the main menu. So the little clock or speedometer icon there in the top left corner takes you back to the dashboard where we started. You can also go to the Transaction Desk menu. More pros and cons. There's about 2 or 3 different ways to accomplish everything in TransactionDesk. So from the dashboard, I can use this little wizard that says create a transaction to jump right into creating a transaction. If you go to the TransactionDesk section, you can see a list of every transaction you've created, and in the upper right, click Add to start a brand new transaction. Either one of them will end up right here in this same spot, so it doesn't matter where you start. If you use the wizard or not, you'll be right into this with the wizard to start the transaction. Don't forget your consumers can see the names of your transactions, so make sure it makes sense to them. I typically, again, call mine something related to the transaction I'm doing. So the property address typically works well. Some people utilize the consumer name, some sort of combination between the client's name and property or something like that. You might work with the same person more than once, but you typically don't work with the same property more than once. So property address is the name of it, works fine. Or again, something like Maple-Jones. Your personal preference again kicks in on the names there. I'm going to be not at all creative and just call it sample for webinar. And then the template I'll use is the listing template I just created. Again, in real life, you can see why I choose to put the word my in front of my template names. So no matter what my office had called those, I would know for sure that's my packet that I put together. All right. Next option here is to import data. You have the option to import from either MLS, Matrix MLS, or Realist Tax. In this case, if I'm doing a fake listing, we would hope it's not in MLS yet, but I could then use the tax record to import the data. If you are making an offer for someone instead of doing a listing, you can import the MLS data. It'll pull in your legal description, lot block, listing agent, listing broker, any documents that were posted to MLS, like a seller's disclosure or something like that. It'll pull those into TransactionDesk as well when you import from MLS. So that's kind of a handy tool. Realist Tax just pulls in the tax-based information, as you might guess. So the tax owner name, the legal description, the property address, that type of thing. One thing to be mindful of is it always defaults to Harris County. So if you're going to be working with a property that's not in Harris, you'll need to be very careful to choose the right county. So once you click this little magnifying glass in the lower right corner, you'll begin the search for the actual tax record for the property. You can either pick the right county from here or in this next screen, either one. We'll find it for you. And you'll type the name and number on 2 different lines. If it's a condo, high-rise, townhome, you might need new unit numbers, but you don't really need to type much more than just the physical property address, street number, street name. And as it says, only type the name, meaning leave off drive, court, street, lane, circle, that type of thing. And then search for the property record there at the bottom. Should result in finding the property record. And just like we were doing on the forms, you're going to check that little circle to select it and verify that it's the correct property. Then you'll click the select button to select it as the one you want to use for your transaction. And you can see it auto-populated the tax ID number there, so it worked. Also, it would give you a big error message if it didn't work. And down below, it presumed that I'm the listing agent since it's a listing type transaction. My template told it was a listing type transaction, and I'm logged in as me, so it presumed me to be the listing agent. You can change any of that now or along the way throughout the transaction. TransactionDesk is pretty forgiving. Once you click Create, you're into putting together the rest of the details of the transaction. Again, an awful lot has been auto-populated or imported from tax for you here. There are a couple of things you do need to fill in. In the upper right where it says transaction status, even if you import from MLS, it's not synced with MLS. So when the property goes active in MLS, you'd need to come back here and switch the status to active. Once it gets an offer, you'd put it in pending and so forth. Again, you may have office coordinators or specific staff who do that for you at your office. So just, again, double check with your office staff and see how that's supposed to be handled if you do it yourself or not. The property type is another manual selection there. It's just an organizational tool. If you envision trying to pull this virtual file 2 years from now to get something out of it, these residential and status and that type of thing will help you find the transactions later. Of course, real time, I hope you have so many listings, they get a little difficult to find them all. So anything that you can use to help filter or sort them and help you find the files is the idea there. Scrolling a bit down to list price. If we put in the price there, you may know some of these other things. You might not at this stage of the transaction. Just fill in what you do know. Double check whatever it pulled in from your tax record. Also, it's always a good idea to just double check and make sure it's accurate. On to step 2, where we're going to fill in any dates that are relevant to our transaction. Again, in the fake listing I'm doing, I probably would just know my list date and expiration date. So we'll just fake list it from there. Again, if you were making an offer or there was an offer on your listing or whatever, you might know some of these other dates. but just leave blank what you don't know and move on into the next step. And then you've got all the parties related to the transaction. Not everyone's a party to or a signer of forms within the transaction, but of course me and my broker are relevant to the transaction as the facilitators of it. Excuse me. In the top right corner, you can click Add at this stage as well and add another contact. So if there were a second seller, for instance, you could add them in if they weren't on the tax record for whatever reason, didn't import. You can also add other people who aren't necessarily a party to the transaction, like a mortgage person, a title company rep, your office assistant or the compliance officer at your company or whomever. If you want to be able to email it to them later, you can add them at this stage and be able to have their information already in your transaction. Again, the system's pretty forgiving, so if you don't add them right now, you can add them later, no trouble. Moving on to step 4, your forms. Again, I pre-filled some of the stuff in my template, and then I auto-populated or pulled in information from the tax record as well. So now once I click and open this listing agreement again, I'm going to see quite a bit more information on the pages. So you can see the owner name and address was auto-populated from tax, and then what I filled in on the template pulls through, and then more from the tax, and so on. You've got your property address on each page, the dates that we just configured through the wizard. Again, there's still some stuff for you to do. You need to get your paycheck, so you want to fill in your commission split. The broker is or isn't authorized to place a key box. So there's different things that you may need to still check or fill out, or that the clients are going to complete or give you information about to complete later. But a good third, I would say, of your form is all filled in and ready to go. Just briefly run through the menus across the top. I had mentioned that there's a save button up there. So file, save is a manual save option whenever you might need to do that. Again, it auto saves for you about every 20 or 30 seconds. So you shouldn't need to click that save button all that often, but it makes me feel a little better just to do it and be sure I'm sure. Where it says add forms, you can add in additional forms. So my example earlier about having the need for a lead-based paint addendum, that wasn't a part of my template. You just simply click add, look through your HARTAR truck libraries, just like we did when we were creating the template, using the key term search or just scrolling through to find them and adding them in. Open form will open things that are already a part of your transaction. So if I wanted to switch from the listing agreement to the seller's disclosure or something like that, I could do that. Copy copies the immediate form. So if I needed 2 copies of the same form, I can get that with that copy function. Clear erases all the text you've typed on the form or that was auto-populated onto the form. So pros and cons to that. Be careful undoing all because it's gone once you do that. It doesn't change your template, but it affects your whole transaction. If you ever need a watermark of confidential or draft, you've got that choice. Delete deletes the one form. Print prints the form. And send offers you a couple different ways to send the form. Email, of course, is just a standard email message. So again, my example earlier of sending them their seller's disclosure, they open it, print it out, fill it out by hand, and utilize that email function. Fax gives you a digital fax, but them a paper fax. So if I wanted to say fax this one form, you click the little checkbox to pick the form or forms, and then click the little icon for the fax machine, fill in their name, their fax number, and send it to them by fax. And again, it's going to generate a fax cover sheet to them as well. So if they need to return it by fax, they'd use the cover sheet to send it back to you, so you got your digital copy, and they still only had to use their standard paper fax. We're almost to the point where I can show you an actual visual of what that fax back cover sheet looks like. The last way you might send it is this sign, AuthentiSign, the electronic signature piece. So either file, send, sign, or the little sign symbol in the very top right corner will get you to the AuthentiSign piece. And then across the top, you can change the fonts, the style, the color, the size, the capitalization of the font throughout this transaction. Transaction forms is just another method to use to fax or email. So same process as going through file, send, and then email or fax. The book, again, jumps page to page. So earlier I jumped to page 10 to fill this in. So you can jump page to page rather than scrolling up and down. You can zoom in and out with the magnifying glass. The ambulance, of course, is where you go for help. Form-specific information, so they have a really good online help, generic help, as well as form-specific help. And then, of course, the toll-free number I gave you earlier. The markup section, again, I would advise you to double check with your broker or manager. You're not technically supposed to strike through the verbiage on the contract form. Redact, for instance, blocks out a whole block of text. You don't need to do that often, and you should have make sure you're doing it the right way if you do that. So just be mindful about that process. The highlighter, you might use that one. That is just literally a highlighter marker. So if you wanted that paragraph to stand out, once you highlight it, you can right click and see different colors to choose from. So again, if maybe you wanted to highlight a certain paragraph for your client to be really sure they read it or something like that, you've got that choice. All right, so I'm going to exit now that we've kind of previewed all those functions. I'm still technically not done with my wizard, but that's step 4, the form section. And again, add in any forms that you might need to from this step, or like I just did when the form was open, my lead-based paint or whatever it might be. Step 5 is your documents. So again, any PDFs that you wanted to upload as a document. Later in the process, if they do return something by fax, it comes automatically to this section. Again, we're finally now where I can show you the cover sheet. If you upload a banner image, it's at the top like that. Otherwise, the fax back cover sheet just looks like that. And this barcode, QR code-ish kind of graphic in the center is specific to this transaction. So again, my client would print this out, or I'd print it and give it to them, mail it to them, whatever it might be. And then when they want to fax me, they just need to be really sure this cover sheet's in front of anything they fax and that they send it to that toll-free number that's on the cover. It's at the top and the bottom of the cover. If they fax it to, say, your office fax number, you're not going to get it. It's not going to TransactionDesk. I mean, you'll get it. It just isn't a digital copy. It's a traditional paper fax. All right, so that's your cover sheet. And again, if you wanted to upload anything else, you've got your add button right there. So basically that's it. 5 quick steps. I make them take a lot longer when I'm teaching than they will in real life, but you just go through those 5 steps and there you are. Now you're at the dashboard specific to this transaction. And you can see the property address involved with the transaction there as well. You can add a photo of the property if you happen to already have a picture of the house. You can put that in there. It's just for your own benefit. Again, maybe just to help you find it later. Oh yeah, that was the one with the red door, or whatever it might be. They allow you the option to add a photo. On the far right of the screen, you have another option. Something unique to each transaction is the email upload address. If you click that little envelope, it'll show you the email address unique to that transaction. So if you wanted to email things directly into the Trade More transaction, you can do that. At the end of the transaction, let's say we closed, you want to go into your inbox in your email and forward all the correspondence to this address. Then you have sort of a virtual paper trail of all of the email conversations that you would have had with them. The email messages and any attachments will all be stored in the document section of this transaction. If you want to give this to a client and have them email directly to it, you could. It's kind of long, but you can copy and paste and maybe carbon copy that on an email to them and say, you know, if they reply or send to that, it goes straight to TransactionDesk. Just like to make sure y'all are aware that exists up there. All right, so now that I'm finished, again, I can open it by clicking the transaction, edit the forms further, fax them, email them, whatever I might need to do. Just to kind of back up, Pretend it's a brand new day and start from scratch. When you first open TransactionDesk, you'll be on your agent dashboard. And now you can see the most current transaction at the top of my little widget is the sample I just made for y'all today. You can sort by the most recently created, date order, name of the transaction, closing date, listing date, expiration date. So you can sort by a couple of different things. And you can just click the name of it to open it up and go in and edit it. Or again, you can go into the second section, that transaction desk section, and click the name from there. Either one allows you to get right back into the transaction. From this transaction desk section, the little radio buttons, the stoplight menu, they call it, on the right, these are all the different pieces of the wizard I just went through. So my example earlier of changing the status, let's say it's pending now. So I just want to go straight to the details section, change the status to pending, and then leave that transaction. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Either open the transaction and then edit from inside, or edit it here without having to open the transaction. Once you open the transaction, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, all those same options are there. So if I need to add a form or fill out a form differently or edit a form, you just go to the form section. Documents are in documents. Details, again, are your dates, your people's names, all that kind of stuff. So again, it's pretty simple to find and edit any portion of that transaction. Also, down about 2/3 the way down the right-hand menu there, you'll see signings. So if you click signings and then click add, you're starting a new signing, meaning you're sending forms out for digital signature. So again, you can either open the form and send it the way I told you, or do it this way. End result's the same for a consumer. They get the forms, they can electronically sign them, and they'll electronically come back to you. So for the webinar today, I do just want to quickly run through that signing process. And again, I clicked signings. I'm going to click add. And then each signing has a unique name. So the signing name that it's asking me for at the top there is the name of what they are signing, not their name and not the property name or transaction name, but what it is they're signing. So again, you can be as generic or specific here as you would want. You can call it please sign these. You can call it forms for your signature. You can call it forms for your listing, or you can call it very specifically listing agreement, buyer rep, IABS, forms for 15047 Traymore. So however detailed or undetailed you want to be. And as you probably can guess, I'm going to call it sample signing for webinar. So then once you click save and go on into the signing section, it's another kind of a little wizard walking you through, kind of holding your hand on the steps. At the top, again, is the name of it that I just gave it. I can change that if I'd like. Your next choice is participant order, is what they're calling that section. Sign in line means everybody has to take a turn. So seller number 1 gets an email. They have to sign everything, date everything, initial everything, complete all their tasks, and then it will automatically send it to seller number 2. You can choose who goes first, and you can put them in whatever order you're in, but each person has to complete all of their tasks before the next person would get it. Simul-sign, everybody gets an email all at once, and they simultaneously have the opportunity to sign. Nobody has to go first or wait on anybody else with the simul-sign. Sign in line gives you the luxury of picking the order that they're receiving it in, meaning I know seller number 1 is going to be tied up in meetings and busy all day, so I can choose seller 2 to get it first and sign everything, and then it will automatically send on to seller 1. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility. Some use that also if they are sending it to, say, a compliance officer or their broker or something like that through AuthentiSign. This gives you the luxury of putting that person as the last person to get it. Since they don't actually sign it, they don't need to be the first person that gets it, and consumers don't have to wait on that person to react. Hope that makes sense. All right, so again, whichever you choose there, you'll have these advanced options. It doesn't remind the person by default. and it also just lives forever. So however long it takes them to click the link and sign, it potentially can just stay there forever waiting for them to do that. If you want to send a reminder, you can choose to do that. Again, they'd get an initial email message, and then if you choose to, they can get a reminder as soon as 4 hours after the original email or as long as 48 hours after, and then a repeat reminder every single 4 hours until they click the link, or every 2 days. I would probably do like 2 days later. If they don't sign it with the initial email, I'll follow up with them 24 or 48 hours later. And then if I still haven't heard from them or they still haven't signed something, I'm just going to pick up the phone and call them rather than continuously sending them emails every 4 hours. I want to know more quickly what's going on. So again, just an example for you. The expiration date expires the link that they get in order to be able to digitally sign. Maybe not so common on a listing, but on offers, sometimes you have to have your offer turned in, your best and final, by a certain date and time. You can't change the time here, but you can choose the date. So if the offer has to be in by 8 a.m. the next day, you can pick 11:59 p.m. the night before. And if they don't sign it or click that link and open and take care of their tasks, then that option is gone after that date and time. Moving to step 2, the participants. It's already going to know the people involved by my having pulled them in from the tax or MLS or adding them manually. Once you check the box by the person, you can see you have a couple of different ways that they can sign it. The remote signer probably will be the most commonly used one. That means they're not with me. I'm emailing them something. They're going to click a link, click through, they'll digitally sign everything, and then it'll email me back. The in-person signer means we are together. We are in person at the same time. So if you're sitting in their living room writing up their listing agreement or something like that, rather than it emailing them, us waiting for that email to arrive, them having to open it, click through, sign everything, and then me waiting for the email confirmation to come back, the in-person signer function will just email me, and then I can turn my laptop or tablet around and just hand it to them and have them click, 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 and sign, and then we're done. So it eliminates one of the loops of the email process. That's also a good tool if they don't use email, if they're not all that comfortable with the whole digital signature kind of process or don't utilize their email all that often. You can be sitting right there with them. Again, hand them your tablet or laptop and walk them through the process of where to click to sign, and then you still get to be paperless and digital, but they didn't have to venture too far outside their comfort zone to complete that process. Reviewer is just that. If your broker or manager is just going to review, accept or reject it, or if you want to send the contract forms for review before a client's physically going to sign it, they would click an accept or reject choice. If they reject it, there's a little place for them to write you a note and tell you why they reject it. So again, that could be your compliance person or your clients, however you choose to use that. The last option is just carbon copy. No actions required. They're just literally receiving copies of whatever document you're sending. Again, I think remote signers probably what each of you will be doing. If you'll notice, once I click to choose the remote option, it then gives me this little kind of red hand on Mr. Martin's entry there. Stop and pay attention is what it's trying to tell me because I'm missing something. If you click on that icon anywhere, it will tell you what it's missing. It's missing his email. I just simply didn't take the time to do it, but if I had typed his email address on the listing agreement itself in that client information section, it would already know it here and I wouldn't have to type it again. Also in the upper right area, where it says Save to Contacts, you have an address book in TransactionDesk. As you add a person or a transaction, they are only transaction contacts. They don't automatically go into the main address book of TransactionDesk. If you check this little box, then they do. So now Mr. Martin will be a permanent list in my address book over here on the left. If I do another contract with him, another transaction with him, I'll have his email and phone numbers and all of that on file in that address book entry. Again, you don't have to add people to contacts, just gives you the option to do that. And let me just correct this real quickly. Please do not email your contract forms to me at that email address because I won't get them. All right, so looking back at that screen, you can see the big red hand went away. It's happy. I filled in the blank for it. You can also click add at this stage to add another person in. Again, if they weren't already a contact on your transaction, you can add them now. So your title person, office manager, whatever it might be. Documents will show you all the documents or forms that you have available in the transaction. You can send all or just one or two or some. So if I just only wanted to send this IABS form right now to get that signed and out of the way, I can do that. If I want to send everything but the seller's disclosure notice, I can do that. The seller's disclosure notice, AuthentiSign one-step process, that's going to be one that they can fill out online and digitally complete it and sign it and send it back. So if I include that in the packet and then I have a second seller, well, I'm having to wait for that first person to fill out that whole form if I have the sign in line option checked. So just kind of be mindful of how it's going to affect the signing and the timing of everybody in your process getting all the forms they need and so forth. So once you've decided what you want to send, just click add and it adds it to the signing. And then the last step is design. There's not a lot of designing. On forms, it automatically knows where they're supposed to sign and date and initial and that type of thing. So there's not a lot to do, really. If you had uploaded a PDF, a document instead of a form, then you would need to drag and drop and tell it where that person was supposed to sign and date and initial and whatever it might be. So in the upper right corner where it says drag and drop, you just simply click and hold and drag and drop what it is you would need. So if they're supposed to sign or initial or date, or you want their printed name on a piece of one of the documents or any of that type of thing, you can drag and drop. Again, you don't need to do this at all on forms. You just only need to do that if you've uploaded additional documents, PDFs, or something like that to the process. Okay, and if you'll notice, some are optional. This sign opt means it's an optional signature, an optional initial. If you want them to check boxes to complete something like that with little check marks, you can do that. The optional might be used for if you wanted to just prove that you presented them with something, you gave them a copy of the HOA docs. That's not something they need to sign for you. You and them and your broker aren't parties to that agreement, but you just wanted to prove that they got a copy of the document. They initialed it. So that's where your signature optional or initial optional might come into play. You can also add a text box. So if you want them to fill in the blank on a certain form, you can. Again, just be really mindful how you're using that and what it is that your consumer is completing on these real estate forms, but you can. Markup is going to be a set of tools for you. Drag and drop are tools or options that you're assigning to the client. Again, I don't really need to do anything else to these forms, but just showing you how you could use it. Again, you can highlight like we did. So if I had forgotten to earlier, I can do that now. All right, zoom in and out on the page, switch from page to page and form to form. Layouts you won't be using. It has to do with TransactionDesk knowing where to put these initial boxes and date boxes. Let it do that work for you instead of you trying to do the work on your own. Basically, that's what your option is there. And then if you had more than one client, you'd have more than one name up here. So you would assign Kenneth some tasks and Judy some tasks and Joe some tasks or whatever it might be, depending on how many parties you have involved. And then once you click next, you're just going to customize the invitation or type up the email message to them. It's not required, but again, it's a nicety to have the subject and the message of the email typed in there, explaining, scroll to the bottom of each page in order to access the documents, call me if you need anything. That type of stuff is what you'd put in the invitation. Again, it's automatically going to put your email signature on the email message because you configured that in the setup that we did at the very beginning of the webinar. So it'll automatically have your picture, your name, your email, all of those things you configured in the setup. Once you click send, off it goes, and you'll be able to see kind of a progress status within the signings section. Again, I'm back at my transaction. I'm still in this signing section, and I have one. It is in the wizard. It's in the process of being sent out to the client. And if you'll just bear with me a moment here, I'll pretend to be Mr. Martin and log in. So this is what the client would get, and it's going to be addressed to each individual specifically. Even if the consumer uses the same email address, if they had the Martin family at AOL.com or whatever it might be, and there were two sellers, Judy Martin and Kenneth Martin, they would each get separate email messages because they're separate parties to the contract. One is seller number one and one is seller number two. So they're able to share an email address, which would still allow them to individually sign all the documents as they were needing to. If you scroll down through the message, you might see the blatantly obvious icon right there for them to click and sign. If for some reason the images don't come through, it does clearly say in text right there that they can click to sign. And then it's literally just a matter of them click, 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 click. Everywhere there's a little yellow box. So again, in the message that you were composing to them, maybe you explain to them, scroll to the bottom of each page, click wherever there's a little yellow box. It'll automatically date anything that's supposed to be dated as of the time and date you click the box. We know they're supposed to scroll to the bottom, but they may not be familiar with how those forms work or what they look like. So that's just a suggested verbiage. There's some default stock fonts there, and they can pick from any one of these different fonts. Some people like it to look like their actual signature, and it does give them the opportunity to draw their signature. If they are on a tablet or a touchscreen computer where they have a stylus or want to use their finger, they can physically draw their name out. I'm working on a good old-fashioned mouse and mouse pad here, so I think I did pretty good, but again, they'll maybe have something that looks a little more like their real signature. And then I'm sure they'll painstakingly read these disclosures there, and once they click accept, they're in the form. So if they do know to scroll down, they can just scroll down and start clicking. They can also click the start button up here in the top right corner, and you can see hopefully the big red arrow on the left pointing to the next task that they have to accomplish. As soon as they click one, it instantly jumps to the next. So somewhere in that email message you were composing, I would highly encourage them to read the forms that they're signing, because click, 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 I just bought a house or sold a house. It's pretty fast-paced at this point. It does make sure that they have the choice to complete the signing or stay and review it. So even though I signed it really quickly, I can still stay here and take my time to read back over it after I've signed it or before. And also, if you'll notice, it automatically dates it the moment they click that signature field. So they don't get to manually type the date. They can't pretend to have signed it yesterday or tomorrow or anything like that. It's digitally embedded in there. And then once they're really, really ready, they just hit complete in the top right. And again, it's going to make really sure they're ready to be completely done signing it and commit those signatures. So they'll click complete signing again. If they want to choose a password just for extra security later, they can. This will allow them to log in and look at their documents and print them out anytime that they want. This confirmation that's on the screen was also emailed directly to them, so they have an email message with the link to open and view those documents anytime that they would want to. All right, so back at TransactionDesk, pretending to be the agent again, back in the signing section, you can see blue ribbons for everyone. He wins, he signed it. And you can see right there it's approved. If you click the name of the signing, they have a lot of cute little icons within TransactionDesk, little checkered flags, meaning they completed that portion, like in a car race, they completed that. I also received an email message as their agent letting me know it was done, and with a link to open and view the signed completed documents. So you can either open TransactionDesk, open the transaction, and then view and access them this way, or just use the link that you were emailed and be able to open their forms. Down in the document section, you've got the original document, meaning the one that was not yet signed, and then you have the one that was signed. If you need to resend it for any reason, you can resend it rather, and send it again. Maybe we forgot a page of the form or something like that. You can do that, and it'll give you revision number 2 of that same form. And it'll kind of kill this one that will not be a valid copy of that form if it's the exact same name. So make sure you name it something unique each time. Down at the very bottom under history, it is a date and time stamp of everything that went through in the process of, or that occurred in the process of having it digitally signed. So if they, for instance, had opened it, meaning they authenticated it, they clicked the link to open and view the documents you sent them, but then they didn't actually sign them, and later they say, oh, never got it, you can say, really? It shows you opened it at 2:54 p.m. So you'll have a running history of all of that. All right, and then just third time's the charm, just to repeat, if you are on this dashboard, when you first open TransactionDesk, you're going to see the transaction, which will be the forms that are not signed. But over here on the right, if you use that AuthentiSign widget, you'll see right there are quick, easy links to click and open the documents that are signed. And that brings us to the end of the kind of super basic overview of stuff in TransactionDesk today. I didn't have any other questions popping up, so if you want to take a moment and submit a question to me, I will be glad to take those. So Derek, what would their QR code do? I'm not certain what you mean on that question. I'm sorry. The FaxBack cover sheet, I think is probably what you're referring to. The FaxBack cover sheet automatically makes that graphic unique to each transaction, and that just helps TransactionDesk know how to get it back to you in TransactionDesk. So all you have to do is just create a transaction and make sure they have a copy of that cover sheet, and everything else will be automated on the cover sheet for you for them to fax it back. The fax back cover sheet, again, if they don't use the cover sheet and they don't send it to the toll-free number on that sheet, then there's no way for it to be a digital copy. They have to send it to either the email address that I pointed out or use the fax back cover sheet to send it to you by fax for it to go digitally into your TransactionDesk program. Okay. All right. As an agent not associated with HER, can I still use TransactionDesk? Absolutely. It's a national product. They happen to physically be in the Austin area. That's where their main offices are and where all their servers are that host the product. But they offer the product across the country to several different associations and individuals. There just might be a fee associated with that. As a member of HAR, there's no additional fee. So that's the big difference there. But anyone can use TransactionDesk if it's available in their area. They aren't 100% countrywide yet, but they're working on it. All right, great questions, y'all. Again, if you have any other questions that come up that you didn't have a chance to get to me right now or just didn't happen to think of right now, you're more than welcome to email or call. And again, give me about 2 or 3 days and I'm going to follow up with you with an email message that'll have a link to this recording and those training pieces that I talked about. And I will, you'll be able to reach me back that way. Sorry, I was having a message pop up here. If you send something through AuthentiSign, so if you use AuthentiSign and SimulSign, everybody gets an email all at the same person, all at the same time. So if you use the sign in line, that's the only one that restricts who gets it first and second and third and so forth. SimulSign, everybody gets it all at once. Doesn't matter who signs first, second, third, just as long as everybody signs it. Okay. And then if you can expand your question, Valerie, about email threads, what about email threads? I'm not understanding completely what you're asking on that one. Thank you very much for your time as well. If you need to exit the webinar, you're welcome to do that. I'll just stay on a couple more minutes to take some additional questions in case anybody's submitting those. I don't want to forget or miss anybody that may have submitted those. So thank you all very much for your time today. You are officially all done. And like I say, just give me a couple days and you'll see that email from me, and then feel free to reach out if I can do anything for you all at all. Appreciate you devoting an hour of your time today. Have a great afternoon.